Hi Pat, it's really good to be in touch again.
Hi Alan.
And greetings to you from all the people in Themes who so much enjoyed your contribution last year. And there's still a big buzz about it. So thanks again for that.
Well, hi to all of you, and thank all the people in Themes for the great hospitality and warmth of the welcome that I got. It was a real good Aussie first trip to your country. So for me, it was a great experience.
Yeah, except we probably forgot to put another shrimp on the barbie, but still. I'd like to ask you to start with about, considering it's been 3/4 of a year since you've been here, that what may be of interest to the Themes network and community in terms of what you said to the Perth audience and what is different today, what's been moving along, and how has the quest been going to move from empiricism, pure empiricism and reductionism to a more humanistic approach?
Well, what I was talking about last year, what I was introducing was the idea that critical thinking is not a negative force within psychiatry or within the mental health field more widely. I was arguing the case, going back as far as Socrates and using people like Paulo Freire and that, to argue the case that in fact critical thinking, being able to reflect on our assumptions, our values, our practices, our history, is not only not a negative, it's actually extremely important and a positive thing in terms of nurturing a professional service user relationship that really is a positive one and a progressive one. So my mission, if I could talk like that, in coming to Australia and giving a number of talks, including the keynote at THEMS, was to try and put forward that positive view of critical thinking. This is not a threat. This is actually something that we should be embracing. And I was hugely encouraged by the response I got in all of the meetings that I had in Australia last year, but particularly the response to the keynote at the THEMHS conference was such a warm and positive response. It really encouraged me and made me think that there's a real appetite for this way of thinking, and people are really getting the idea and connecting with it very, very positively. So I guess since then, I've been doing more of the same, and really I'm encouraged, if I might say, by response that I'm getting more and more from psychiatry, actually. And we had a meeting in London in January along similar lines, a big meeting that was co-produced by professionals in the Mental Health Trust and service user organisations in the locality in West London. A big conference, had professionals, including psychiatrists, many service users, family members there, along the lines you've been organising in THEMS. And that was a really positive experience. We seem to hopefully be moving beyond a situation where people just start throwing punches at each other, not literally, but you know what I mean. We start, service users slag off the psychiatrists get defensive and say, we can't talk to these people. But we do seem to be hopefully moving to a space whereby dialogue is actually starting to break out around the world between psychiatry and the service user movement and their organizations. And I think hopefully that indicates some degree of maturity on both sides, that people are actually starting to see the value of this. I know that you, Alan, and Viv and others have been leading this kind of approach for many years. I think it's hugely encouraging now that we are actually starting to see this happen. So I guess the response to your question is that I've certainly been trying to continue that direction of trying to introduce critical thinking as a positive thing, not as an attack on professional values or position or whatever, but actually to an enriching of the professional position. I've been trying to do that. And as I say, I'm starting to feel, perhaps I'm naively optimistic and hopeful, but I'm starting to feel that there is some shift within our profession of psychiatry and perhaps other professions as well.
So, in a sense, one of the things that really struck us at Themes is that this dialogue and a very, as you say, non-defensive dialogue without any attack element seems to be breaking out between both psychiatrist groups and service user and family groups for sure, but also with other mental health disciplines. That a wider range of people are getting it. So I don't see it as just an argument that has been there historically between psychiatrists and consumers and families, but with the other disciplines as well, who've often wanted to have more space for the psychological and the social and the cultural.
Yes, I think that's the case. So I mean, as I say, I think the Thames experience for me, with that wide diversity of stakeholders, you know, in the same space for a number of days, I think what you've achieved there is something really special. I don't know of anything like it anywhere else, where you're bringing that range of people together and doing so in a way that's fun, that's positive, that people come away energized from. Yes, we have our differences. We have a different set of priorities sometimes. Yes, there are different languages used. Sometimes there are real differences between the perspectives being argued. But part of progress, if you like, in mental health, when you think, you know, we've come a long way, I think, in the last 30 years, certainly that I've been working in this field. I think we sometimes underestimate just how much progress we have made. But we've moved away from very institutional models of care. We're now much more engaged with people in the community, in their own homes, in non-institutional settings. And even if we still do use institutions, we've learned to worry about using them, so to speak. And I think that's important, that we actually, even if we still use hospitals, we don't have any sort of idealistic kind of notion that hospital is the answer to everything. I think we use hospitals now, but we use them much more thoughtfully than perhaps we did in the past, as temporary places where people might have to go for a short period. Sorry, Alan, I missed that.
As part of the spectrum more than as the centre of the...
Exactly. And I think that's, as I say, I think we sometimes underestimate just how much progress we've made. I think, you know, we're all aspiring for much better services, for much better quality of care. And that's a good thing, but I don't think we should just, you know, I think we need to keep our positive energy up sometimes, because we can get dragged down by being overly negative about all the problems that we have. And God, believe me, I'm a clinical director of a service here in Ireland, and I know all the problems that we have. But I think part of our job sometimes as professionals is to keep a positive energy going and keep hopeful and that. And you know, you think about progress. Where will we be in 30 years' time? You know, what will the mental health world be like in 30 years' time? And my sense is that progress will come from more dialogue between the stakeholders, from much more focus on social context in which people are living their lives, from what I've called the hermeneutic aspect of mental health, which is the meaningful aspect of mental health, from looking at the importance of relationships in terms of people healing. I think we'll get much more value out of investing in that kind of work, that kind of research, that kind of service development than we are ever going to get from investing in neuroscience or genetics or laboratory-based research as such. Not to dismiss that, but I think in the last 20, 30 years, psychiatry in particular has become overly focused on that. And I think we need to shift our sense of where progress is going to come from. I don't think it's going to come from guys in white coats. I think it's going to come from engagement with individuals, with communities, through dialogue. That's where progress is going to happen.
And I guess we see things as such a community, and it's in some senses the feedback we get is it seems like a front for the reform movement in mental health in Australia and New Zealand, and we're pleased that people see it that way. But this, this takes us to social movements, and how important are social movements in not just having the message of reductionism to hermeneutics, but how to move forward and get a wider community active in this.
Absolutely. And I think we can learn a lot from people in the intellectual disability area, where, I've seen here in Ireland, I don't know what it's like in Australia, but in Ireland, there's been a transformation in the lives of people with intellectual disabilities in my generation, from a situation where, particularly in rural areas, people with intellectual disabilities, something like Down syndrome, for example, were kind of hid at home, weren't sent to school, weren't ever seen in the workplace, and had very, very poor quality of lives, very oppressed quality of lives in many ways. Now we've seen a transformation in that, as I say, in my lifetime. Now, and one of the things that's been, extremely important in that have been the social movement around intellectual disabilities, and that's been led by families by and large. Professionals have also played a positive role in that. But something like, for example, the Special Olympics, which has really valued in an important way the contribution of people with disabilities in sporting life, and really making something important out of that. That has given huge empowerment and positivity to people with disabilities. The genetic factors underlying Down syndrome were actually identified more than 50 years ago. But that genetic insight didn't in itself lead to any change in the life of people with Down syndrome. What has changed their lives has been the social movement from families, from individuals with Down syndrome themselves, and from the wider community responding to that and learning to become comfortable with those people in its midst and seeing them as having a positive role. And I think we can learn, those of us in the mental health field can really learn from that. And I think we are learning, because I see that happening around us at the moment, whereby there is a social movement now to transform our experience of mental illness, mental health problems. And that's not necessarily coming from psychiatry, but I think psychiatry can play a positive role in encouraging that. And we should be encouraging that. But it's coming from a whole range of people, not least from service users themselves.
Take it to another level of social presentation.
Can I mention one thing before I finish, which kind of draws a little bit on what we've already discussed. One of the things that I was really impressed with when I was in Perth was a project that I think you had some involvement with, but that was being led by Dr. Michael Wright, which was around, which is called the Looking Forward Project, around mental health services for Indigenous Aboriginal people in Western Australia. And I just think that was a real example to me of what a really positive mental health project could be. Because what Michael was doing was leading people to really listen to the voices of the Indigenous community and to learn from them how to go forward. So, in other words, the idea of progress in that model that he was presenting was one of dialogue and training the professionals to really listen to the experiences, to the insights, to the values and culture of Indigenous Australians. what was really encouraging was the level of buy-in from those in the service provider sectors who had gone out and met with the elders from Aboriginal communities in that area. I don't know enough about it to comment any way kind of in detail about the project, but to me that was real kind of example of how I see us moving forward in a positive way. And I think that project and what's happening with that has something really to teach us in the whole way we're thinking about global mental health, because too much of the global mental health movement as it now stands is about seeing the Western world and Western experts of having all the answers, and the job being to get those answers to communities all around the world. What Michael Wright's project was doing was actually going in the opposite direction to that, and I think there was something wonderful in it. And I think it kind of it was what slight frustration for me was having to come away without having the time to actually spend more time to learn about that. But it's something that's really struck in my mind since I've been in Australia, was that maybe there's some really positive work happening there that can actually be very helpful to the rest of the world.
I think we should leave it there, because I think that's a really good point to finish on. And I'm hopeful about global mental health on that basis too, because I think it is a real exchange between senior managers and clinicians on the one hand, and esteemed elders of Indigenous communities on the other. It's a long-term project. It goes on for years, so hopefully it will be sustained. Yeah. So thank you, Pat, and thank you for coming out here, and to come out again at some stage. I know there's a lot of people who want you to come out again, so we hope we'll see you out here before too long again.
I'm looking forward to it already.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Alan. Thanks, Viv. Thanks, Ash. Bye now.